Some of the things that we've learned this week addresses like what we do with how people react. And I noticed in family therapy, that's a good system because instead of addressing the key issues, you're talking to different members, making them accountable for their part in it, and that minimizes the not the enmeshment so much, but the codependency issues is what I'm trying to say. Anyhow, this week, what I've been doing in this class is looking at a lot of therapists online that have been suggested, like the Tony Robbins, and one person said the 7 Languages of Love, the Chapman, and a lot that we did just in that 13 minutes that I caught of the group session this week on Collaborate was really helpful because when I went to that link that it suggested 2 other ones, a book called The Untethered Soul and then The Surrender Experience. And these are good spiritual elements that also help with people realizing their destiny and things, so that when I hear about drug addiction, I hear a lot that like the 12-step and everything is real helpful because one person is in denial, and helping them to find their purpose is one way to help them address like how they're going to react, get them more focused, and help them with their motivation. And I don't know if it discussed that so much with substance use this week with the Bowen, but I did a lot in methadone with helping families by doing individual sessions and working with the other counselors, because they would have one person and I would have the other in the relationship. And it's sad because they don't realize when they get divorced, somebody else is going to raise their children. They're not going to have any type of hope financially, whereas before they did, and they just get real caught up, and I want to leave this other person who may be the person in front of them that is the right person. And the sad thing is that the wife is more emotional, like that article where it states that they are more tendency to use is because of their inability. And then I read an article about their relationship self-regulation, and they called it RSR. And it was a lot to do with the perception of what they thought the other person was doing in that relationship that helped them to receive the relationship. And there was a difference between the men and the women in the relationship. And the woman was the one that was supposed to cause the havoc, and the man was supposed to, and I guess that's why. But the man was supposed to be the one to say, I love you no matter what. And that's what the woman's job is to break that until they get that message. Otherwise, the marriage is in shambles. And it would drive the man away because he doesn't feel like a man. He feels more like somebody, I guess, being harassed because the female will be crazy. And in the session, it seemed kind of weird at first. Like I was like, this is real intense. Is this, even what I want to do? And then later I realized, well, it's necessary. It's just a little check on the things I guess they have to do in therapy in order to make it work. And it is, and we're talking a lot about their patterns and breaking them and helping them. And I guess that would be one way to go. But if I feel like if the male is acting like, reversing roles, because I call it being selfish, and it's a lot to do with the substance use. That's where it's great to send them, like in that the article was recommended, a third party person that's not on substances, like a support if they don't both have support, or just somebody to de-triangulate. They're a good sounding board, and that the husband could go to AA and get that, or NA is good. And a lot of times the wife has to be willing to step back. That's where you have to meet them on the, I consider it like the bridge. And I think Townsend was another great author, now I'm thinking about it, for family therapy. And what Townsend did was was like helping the couple with the relationship in terms of spirituality. And he would say that, you go and you meet them on the other side. And I hear that a lot. You wait for them, you don't drag them across. And the man, there's a chapter in the 12-step where it's to the wives, and it tells them basically to back off. And so I think the counselor is very key in that. And I wrote this week about how the counselor they need to go to each other. And the Tony Robinson was pretty good. But he wasn't talking about substance use either. And I think I had a couple of notes, and I'm just really excited about it all, and I'm just trying to read more about it and try to remember all the last minute stuff, but I guess I'll just put that on the collaborate. But yeah, the fact that their life leads to so much disarray, and all the husband has to do is prove to the wife that he's going to be there instead of, trying to push her buttons and such. I feel like I do like Gottman because that it does get into those relationship fighting strategies. But when you get emotions thrown into the mix of it, I think that has a lot to do with the relationship. And Tony Robbins was more like a motivational speaker, and it was all great to hear. But when they're in denial, that's like repression. It's going to pop up no matter what. And so these theories that we're learning are great. The Bowen theory, it's not as confrontational. I like to throw in a little bit of reality therapy when you have children and you want to work on some of that authoritative parenting and confronting them, but yet letting them make their own choices and such. They're not the ones with substance use. And I wish that in our genogram we could draw like there was room in there to draw just a family on the immediate with the chemical dependency bonds, because it shows how dysfunctional it is, and it talks more, we get more into this unit because it's a great way to address the problems. And lastly, what I was going to mention was that you talk to them and ask them what their part is, being like some questions like, say the husband's the one on the stand. Well, it's a system, so obviously with the strategic family therapy, you're going to look at, well, what's the other person's responsibility in it, and then ask them, well, what are you going to do? Because they'll sit there and complain left and right about how they can't handle anymore, and they're just going to stop. And I think whether the husband or the wife, nobody wants to hear that the other person's going to give up. And that's one of the things I prefer more about the reality therapy, is there's a little bit more on choices and explaining what you're doing in terms of not giving up on the other person.